Hello, my name is Joanna Rączaszek-Leonardi from the University of Warsaw.
Hi, this is Katharina Rolfing speaking from Paderborn University.
And today we will have a pleasure to present to you our publication-based presentation, which would give to you the work that we were conducting in our respective labs within the joint project, which was called Early Semantic Development. The title of our talk, as you see, is Structured Ecologies for Social and Linguistic Development. With the underscoring the ecologies, we wanted to give you a little bit complementary picture to the main topic of the conference, which is changes in representation and processing abilities in development. Our mission is to derive some clear conclusions from our joint work about what is the surrounding, the ecology of those changes, of those cognitive changes in development of language. And usually such surroundings or backgrounds are termed contexts. So, Katharina, how is it understood traditionally, the context?
For developmental studies, it is of question how do children manage to isolate knowledge from the rich context. From a classical view, learning language is about mapping an entity onto a concept that an infant has about this entity. The science is thus assuming that following situation appears, like here on the picture. The baby is put into a world which consists of isolated entities. And because of this conception, context is commonly operationalized in terms of a background against which the entities appear. It is basically like a tablecloth that changes in pattern or colors, but the entities on it remain the same. Thus, in classical view, context is rather static and independent to the persons or events occurring in it. Joanna, I assume that in ecological psychology, this conception is different, right?
You're right. There is basically no cognition without environment in ecological psychology. And environment, in a sense, is co-constitutes cognition. And since that's why its place, it's so important to talk about how it is structured, the environment and the context, as you say. Since James and Eleanor Gibson's contribution to this approach, it was developed by many psychologists, including the developmental ones like Esther Tellen, Linda Smith, Karen Adolphs, and many others. And I think this great quote from Harry Heft summarizes this approach very nicely. It says that animate beings, unlike inanimate things, are ceaselessly active. This, of course, is always true for cognitive research, but also it is continually in the process of engaging their surroundings in a selective manner. And it's very important that it's engaging and being engaged by the surroundings which are active and co-constitute this context with the baby. So in a way, the animal exists in relation to a flow of events, and their functioning is best understood as that of dynamic organismic process in context. So we, ecological psychologists, imagine this context like that. I mean, it's so complex, it's so dynamic. It's much more dynamic even than on this picture where people are rather static, but things happen here. Things happen around the baby and they involve the baby, then engage the baby as an important participant in those events. As you can see, is that those events are not simple. Some events are very short, just like passing a ball. Other events are very complex, just like going for a walk with the baby, for example. And our research was geared towards identifying what are those swirls of social activity most often that sort of bring the baby with it, that draw the baby in the activity. That was our objective in our project. So, Katharina, you have extensive experience studying parent-infant interaction, and how do you see those contexts that infants are engaged in.
So maybe let us turn to the very basic experience that a child makes in the world, which is a social interaction. In this very simplified example here, you see that the mom and the baby are playing a peekaboo game. You also see two different types of actions. Just by looking at this animation, there is one moment of engaging, so both are really interacting with each other and following each other. And there is also a small moment where the baby is actually disengaged and looking somewhere else. So the mom will wait for the baby to move to the next phase. This way, both partners are engaged in this game, and you can see this joint action is driving here communication. So in some early social interactions are highly structured by having a clear script that they provide. For example, this peekaboo game consists of covering, uncovering, and acknowledgement. In our work, we could show that babies intensify their behaviors in those particular phases rather than infant behavior being evenly distributed over the whole time of the interaction. But the question now is, what drives actually the sequence of action? What are the mechanisms for that? We realized this investigation with our two close collaborators, Iris Nomico and Nicole Rosmanit. And in our work, we applied methods that account for the dynamic coupling of the partners. And in this respect, Joanna is just an expert.
Yes, so with Iris and Nicole, especially with Iris, we looked very closely at interactions, and we observed them and hand-coded the behaviors. And we also used dynamical systems methods such as recurrence analysis, or rather cross-recurrence analysis, to see how the baby couples with the parent. And here we would like to show you just several results of this research, which pertain to those very short time scale couplings of behaviors. We coded gaze at mother and gaze at infant from both participants, and we conducted recurrence analysis, cross-recurrence analysis on those data, which basically shows you when the behaviors are exactly the same from the two participants. So as you can see on the left figure, when you don't normalize the data, you can see that at 3 months, the babies are looking all the time practically at the mother and the mother at the baby, because the recurrence rate, the frequency of similar behaviors from the two participants is very high. And you can see that it drops significantly at 6 and 8 months. But when you normalize the data, what you see is actually that they couple much more tightly. So they stop looking at each other all the time, but rather couple their behavior reactively or in anticipation of the other behavior. And this coupling becomes much more sharp. With the same methods of coding behaviors and then using cross-recurrence analysis, we can see how turn-taking structure also emerges in those short time close sequences of behavior. And here you can see how at 3 months, again, the red line, here we are talking about turn-takings with vocalization. You can see that the mother is following the vocalization of the child at 3 months, but then at 6 and 8 months, they are rather getting quiet when the other one speaks, which is regular turn-taking behavior. And we can see similar turn-taking not only in vocalizations, Katarina, right?
No, we can also see turn-taking when looking at multimodal behavior. So actually, with our investigation, we were among the first who attempted to capture longer sequences of actions and their timings across different modalities. We were driven by the idea that multimodal actions not only allow for local short couplings, but also for longer events, which we call the pragmatic frames. Okay, here actually in this animation you see an example of a pragmatic frame. Whereas in early interaction, any behavior of the infant is taken as communicative, parents are increasingly reacting to the use of symbols. One of such a symbol is a pointing gesture, and you see here how parents engage because the infant is actually pointing. So similarly to the peekaboo game, here we also have a clear sequence of actions. The baby is moving towards an entity, the mother is following, the baby points, the mother provides a label, the baby continues to gaze on the entity, and the mother elaborates on the object. Imagine here that bear could be a new word for the baby to know, to get to know, and in this animation, what we would like to transfer is the conception of language learning, that it is not about just mapping of a word onto a concept, but it is about an embedding of a new word into a known routine of labeling. By this routine, the child knows how to cognitively and interactively engage with the partner to experience about the new word, and even more. And in our theoretical work, we suggest that early language development is about routines in which words increasingly become an effective means of exchange and joint actions.
Right, and if you have such a picture of language development amongst this swirl of events, and that picture in which action is inseparable from language, so then the main question becomes how it will ever become separated. And Katarina worked on that as well a little bit.
Yeah, before our work in the literature, we found the information that early in development caregivers talk mostly about things and events that are present immediately in the context, and the child can grasp them. In investigating the input to 6-month-old, this is the one paper, and 12-month-olds, this is the other paper, we found that there is a quite significant amount of what is called decontextualized speech to the infants. We found that caregivers talk about entities that are not present, but they commonly embed them into actions, basically behavioral routines that predict a change. Like here, the dressing action predicts that they will go outside, and this way it is easier for the child to imagine or to simulate what will happen next. And the ability to connect events is also important for the syntactic abilities. Together with Terence Deacon, Joanna worked on a model of how syntax emerges.
Right, because as you see, there are only flows of events here. There are not really symbols floating around if you look at the mother-infant or parent-infant interaction. So the question becomes, when do they ever become symbols, and therefore symbols of language, of this language system that we later use in a decontextualized way, also away from the situations that we are talking about. And we used the model of Terence Deacon that he presented in Symbolic Species, in which he actually proposes that what helps detach language from immediate involvement in those engaging contexts and situations is that the symbols of language have also relations to other symbols of language. So it is a little bit like that a child never hears a single word. Always words come in phrases, in sentences, in relations to other words. And we notice that in the context that there are also relations present that can accompany those relations among words. And this is exactly the mechanism that Terry Deacon proposes that happens in language emergence. As you can see here, when the mother says, hands up, the up is iconic to the gesture that she is making with the baby's hands. So not only single words mean, but also the relations between the words, between the symbols, start to mean in the situation. And this is the beginnings of our model that we are presently working on, and that hopefully will become validated both in empirical research and also in our computational models and applied to other situations. Our new work is exactly this. I am trying to develop computational models which will validate this model of ungrounding symbols from immediate context. And Katarina?
Yes, and we are trying to use pragmatic frames actually as a structure for an interaction for the children to get some language support.
And with this, we would like to thank you for your attention and invite you to ask some questions.
Looking forward to your questions.